Good morning. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the original Loretta Brown Show radio to open the heart, heal the soul, and awaken the consciousness with my right-hand man, Benny Mathers. Da, 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 da,
Hello. Good morning, Loretta.
Yeah, I always have to add Benny in there because he makes the magic, and I just look cute. Well, maybe it's the other way around.
Wow. Early morning shots fired. Totally fine. I accept it.
Oh, thank you.
You can beat me by cuteness. That's fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we can both do the magic because
Of course.
it happens out there. So anyway, I hope everybody's having a good morning. You're waking up, and I'm looking out, and I don't know what the weather's doing today, but we've been having some really great weather. And honestly, I would like a little bit of rain. Yeah, it's dry. It's really dry out there. And I just want to say this. This is not the time to be setting off your fireworks that were left over from the 4th of July.
No, we're done. We're past that.
No, we're past that. Actually, I woke up last night and somebody was doing that, and I thought, oh,
really?
Yeah. And I understand there's this massive fire down in Oregon. I have clients down there. Some people have been evacuated. So just water, do what you can. I've got my hummingbird feeder out there and realized the other day that the hummingbirds, the bees, and the ants were all vying for it. So I had to clean it up and move it around and put out a little bit of water for everybody so they can get along. We've got to get along now. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a great guest coming on. So my introduction and little Skywatch report, my little astrological forecast will be very short because she's going to tell us everything we ever wanted to know and then some. So I am Loretta Brown. I'm the owner of Reiki Oasis, located right here in the greater Seattle area for the last 27 years. And we are going strong over there. You can find out more about me at ReikiOasis.com and schedule at schedule.ReikiOasis.com. I am doing some in-person sessions and still a lot of remote sessions because number one, people have found it to be very convenient, and also because I've got clients all over the world. Every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, I have Sunday meditation with Loretta. And you can sign up for that. If you cannot join me at that time, I'll just send you a recording. It's that easy. And then you'll have a meditation. You can listen to it anytime you want. Every month, I have a class for women called the Temple of the Divine Feminine. And this month, we will be meeting on Saturday, July 24th. And that will be via Zoom. And so, yeah, please join us. We do all kinds of wonderful things that help nourish our soul. And a big shout out to my patrons. I am a listener supported show. You can go to patreon.com/The Loretta Brown Show and become part of that family. So anyway, we do have a lot going on. This is a busy astrological weather month of July. And I'm only going to talk briefly about two things, and if my guest wants to talk more about them, I invite her, but we are going to talk about her wonderful book and what she does. But on July 13th, was just a couple of days ago, Venus and Mars had this amazing sort of alignment. And Venus and Mars, when they get together, are lovers. You know, Venus, the goddess of love, and Mars is that fearless warrior. And when they come together, there's a merging of energies for about a week on either side of that date. And of course, I never really think of things as light switches on the wall, but it may bring some things to the forefront for you to take a look at in regards to heart and love and relationships. And who knows, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's a good thing. Yeah. And then today, which is July 15th, Chiron, the asteroid known as the Wounded Healer, is going retrograde, and it's currently in the sign of Aries. And it will remain in retrograde until December 19th. And I sort of think of this as helping us heal the wound of our identity, which is kind of a big wound. So it's not really about healing the wound for the sake of perfection. That's not the idea. But perhaps we could gain some wisdom that the wound has brought us to, maybe we can take a look at that and say, well, what is my connection with myself now? What have I gone through and where have I found myself to be? You know, because it is always about our growth. And I say it all the time, and I know my guest agrees with me. We are greater than the stars in some aspect, and we're just taking a look at the mirror of our own self up there, which segues right into my guest. I'm so excited to have her. It's really, really fun. Like I say, I give you guys little what I call hobbyist updates because I'm a hobbyist astrologer, but Katharine Merlin is the real thing. She is a practicing astrologer for over 40 years. She's the author of several books to include Astrology, the Magic Mirror. I love this title, Astrology, the Magic Mirror. And astrology is just, to me, one of the best ways to look into the mirror. I think of numerology, astrology, tarot, and all of these things as just, you're going to look at yourself from a different angle. I hate to say you're the elephant in the room, but you are kind of, and you look at yourself in many different ways. Katharine, who says she loves to be called Kate. Kate, thank you for being on the show and welcome. Yeah, it's great to
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I want to start out because a lot of my listeners are already on this train of astrology, right? But there are a lot of people who don't really understand what it is. And I probably, like you, have ran into people who go, oh, I don't believe in that. You know, like it's a belief system or something.
Exactly. It's not a belief system.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you see it working. It actually is not based on the planets beaming down on us and doing things to us. And that's how it's presented to the public. And, you know, that naturally people are going to say, well, that's ridiculous. Because it is ridiculous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. I have said to people, and I want you to expound upon this, but sometimes I've said, I look at it like an energetic weather report, right? So if I'm like today, I started out looking out the window going, well, what is happening today? And if it's sunny, I probably am not going to wear all my winter clothes, right? And so it's like a certain amount of preparation, perhaps.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, the weather. And in fact, there are some astrologers who predict the weather from astrology.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because you can. It's all related. It's all one.
So what would be your definition of astrology, and what is the difference between astrology and astronomy?
Well, astronomy is observing the planets in the sky, seeing how they're behaving in terms of their relationship to the whole picture, the whole physical picture. Whereas astrology is totally different. And in ancient times, people looked up at the stars and they were fascinated by them, and they created myths about them, and they saw pictures in the sky of, you know, centaurs and all kinds of creatures, and they related to them in that fashion. But what it's really about, and I think this is just the truth of everything, is that everything that occurs in the same minute is related. So you can look at the pattern of the stars and the various planets and gain insight into that specific time. It's about time. It's not about cause and effect. It's about as above, so below, synchronicity. That's what it is.
I love that, as above, so below.
So do I.
You know, I've traveled all over the world, and I remember being in Egypt, and they're like, okay, the pyramids are like possibly lined up with Orion's belt, or, you know, whatever it is. And I really believe that there are reflections, and like I said, that's why I love your title so much, The Magic Mirror, because I've always looked at it like a reflection of some kind of mirror. Yeah.
You ever hear the term scrying? I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
That's the ancient art of looking in a mirror and telling the future from what appeared in the mirror. But I think astrology is a form of scrying.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I hadn't really thought of it like that. It's really, really great. Yeah. Um, so the magic mirror in your book, because we're touching all over it,
Yeah.
that's what you're talking about.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. You can look at one thing and find out about another thing. And you look at a mirror and you see your reflection. So you find out things about yourself by looking at your face. You find out what you apparently look like. And
Over there, or my eyes are puffy or something, right?
I know it's this as above, so below. All things. The whole trick is when we're here in this body, in this world, we're living in time. And so if you take a little slice of time, you can find out a great deal, but it has to be understanding that everything is related in terms of that specific moment. Everything that you see is related to everything else that happens in that moment.
Which means you're an active participant in that. Because you're
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're not a passive recipient of some kind of thing that's being done to you, which that's what a lot of people think astrology is.
Well, and then you talk about too, like, I think the first chapter, when the first chapters in your book is about fate. And a lot of people do look at it like that. Well, then I'm fated for these terrible things, right? Or you were born under a lucky star, so life is easy for you. But look at me, right?
But
So,
I think we enter time at a specific moment for a specific reason. The things that happen to us are related to what we are, but that's because we enter time already existing on another plane.
oh, I love how you put that. So if my soul is eternal, right? And I'm going along and I'm dipping into life and coming back, dipping in. So, and I just have to ask this question. So the chart, the astrological chart, can actually tap into that continuity of the soul. And
Precisely.
Okay.
Precisely. I like to say I'm very pleased with this idea that it's when I look at a chart, it's like coming into the middle of a story. The being, and I frankly know this, the being is eternal. And so they come into time and they bring with them what they had before when they were in time. They re-enter that level, you might say. And yes, it's total continuity. And so what we experience is what we need to experience. And we bring to our experience maybe a newness and a freshness every time we're here, hopefully.
Well, we do have people, because a lot of my people say, why do I keep, getting involved with the same guy and it's not the right guy, right? Like that pattern.
Yeah, there's a pattern there that is and sometimes it's karmic, quite frankly. I hate to use that old 60s word, but we encounter people we need to learn from. And we have a pattern that is ours. And so the more we experience our own reality, and if we take responsibility for it, then we're going to learn. If we just think, oh, this horrible guy, he turned out to be so mean, it's just not that. I mean, why were we encountering that person?
Now, because you do people's charts and you've done them for over 40 years, right? And I did hear what you said. You said a couple of things there. Number one was that it's a story. Every time you do someone's chart, you're sort of stepping into their story. Their story in this lifetime has to deal with the moment they decided to step in, which I was also thinking about, oh, you're late to the party, huh? Or you're early,
That's cute.
right? Which, because I like to make things simple. So if I'm early to the party, I have a very different experience than if I'm late to the party, right? And if I dressed appropriately or if I didn't, right? It's a simple way of looking at it.
Sure.
But when you do a chart, like the first thing you would do would be like the birth chart.
Yeah, and that's everything, and it's always a challenge because every being is like a different country. That's how I see it. It's like, oh, I've arrived in this different country now. What is this? And to bring to it an openness to try to witness another being's reality is what it's all about. You can't have too many preconceptions because that clouds it, and it's presumptuous, I think, really.
How did you get into this? Because I can tell that this is really who you are. It's truly who you be. Yeah.
The funniest thing, I discovered about 10 years ago that my great-great-grandfather, who I knew nothing about him, my mother's family, but I was trying to find out about his wife, who had my name and was living in the place I was moving to. And I couldn't find out anything about her. So I Googled him, and I got this article, Astrology Verified, by a theosophist. And it talked all about my great-great-grandfather as an astrologer who was known. And in fact, I just got something from somebody who is involved in an very old newspaper publication called the Truth Seeker, which is fascinating. I don't know if you've heard of it. And the guy who published it was a good friend of my great-great-grandfather. So his obituary was published in there, and I found out so much about him. He was a very respected astrologer, and in fact, it's over here. I don't know should I read it?
I think that would be wonderful. I, for some reason, have goosebumps while you're talking about that. So,
Loretta, it blew my mind. It said, he often expressed himself as having no doubt of the reality of spirit life, affirming that he had received proofs strong enough to place the matter beyond a question in his mind. Now, I've said that myself. And then he was an ardent believer in astrology. His reputation as an astrologer became quite widespread, and many resorted to him to consult the aspects and portents of the stars and their various interests. It goes on, it was deemed remarkable by many who visit how he could be so. He was a horary astrologer, which is a little different. And also he was a homeopath. So he combined homeopathy and astrology. Now, he was a brilliant. I feel so fortunate to be descended from him.
What was his name?
Dr. Charles Winterburn.
Oh man, I am getting goosebumps like crazy. Don't you think he's here? And
yeah, I think he's guided me. And
yes,
here I was, this kind of hippie girl, and astrology just drew me like a magnet, and I just started studying it and knew it. And I would when I was doing my charts for people, I would ask for guidance, and I think he's always just been around.
Yeah. I'm just going to have to validate that because I have goosebumps, which is one of my signals of dearly.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm just like, wow. Okay, that's there. Yeah. And you know what I think is really, really lovely as you sharing it, it makes me feel like crying. I'm that empath girl. And it also, though, is reminding me to say to everyone, our ancestors help us, and we are not alone. And they want to help us. And
it's the truth.
And and if there was ever a time on planet Earth we needed it, it's now. It is now. Yeah.
No, I know the Chinese worship their ancestors, and I can see why, because they're participating in our experience. I've had amazing experiences around his family and everything, and they're part of who we are, and they're with us. And if we acknowledge them and honor them, and I love talking about him, in this public way. And his son was also a brilliant person, a brilliant homeopath who has articles online I found from, the early 1900s. I just feel like okay, so here we are. We think we're so special and separate, and we're not. We're part of something else, something greater than us.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to say, I think he wanted to be on the radio interview. So we brought him public and he seems to be okay with that. So I'm just so glad you shared that. This idea that we're part of something greater, I think needs to be our mantra going forward.
Going into the Aquarian age here, as we're doing.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about the stars and how each one of us is a star in its own right in that sky of all that is. And to be able to find our way, to know more about why we are here right now and who we are, that to me is what you help people get to. It's a gift. It's a true gift to be able to look into that magic mirror and say, oh my gosh, there's this thing about myself that maybe I didn't really know, or a validation of the self so that you can amplify it, right? Instead of spending time over here, just
when am I going to get married? You don't want that kind of thing. It's like, well, you have a lot of possibilities, or, well, I'm sorry, but what you're carrying in terms of your emotional nature is so negative that you probably be better off not marrying. I mean, you can't say those things to people.
No, you can't. But I want to kind of point this out because I run into the same thing, and with all due respect and blessings and love to all, quite often people will come, and I know they do this with you, where they're saying, when will I get married? Who will I marry? Will I be healthy? Will I be happy? Right? As though somehow it, like I said, is fated or written in the stars that you will do this, 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 and this. And it's not necessarily that clear.
No, you're writing the story. Mm-hmm. See, I think that's what people need to understand, that they are the author of their fate. Right?
Yeah. So the astrological chart, then, when we say we are, the master of our own ship and we are creating this, so how can it help someone? What is the valuable information that someone could get? And that might not be an easy answer because I suddenly had a list of like 1,000 things, right?
Well, I'll just tell you something about my chart that I understand. I have a very strong Mars, which is your aggression, but it's your self kind of pushing out into the world, and here I am. And then it's in a difficult aspect to the contractive Saturn. And Mars in a woman often it's the male side of your nature. So the man you encounter in your life is going to embody the traits that you're carrying, and you'll encounter them in him. But also in me, I'm strong and aggressive, but I'm also very self-protective and uncertain at times, or afraid. I see those things playing out, that I have a conflict with my own aggression. And it's things like that you can see and you can use and work on in yourself.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you very clearly. I'm thinking to myself of, and I'll just ask this as a question, because a lot of people just look at their sun sign, right? And they go and they read some little blurb somewhere about the sun signs. So what is really, what do people really be needing to look at?
Well, the fact is that sun sign astrology is not so terribly off-putting, because our sun sign really does help us to understand some ways in which we operate. So we can get insight from that. But if we really want to see the story we're writing and see the continuity of it, then we should get our charts done.
There's a lot of different types of astrology.
There are.
Right. And there's a lot of different astrologers. How can someone wade through that? Like, where should they look? And do you do personal charts?
Well, I have in the past. I'm sort of stepping back a little bit, I do them. But I think in terms of all the different, and this has taken me a long time to get to this place, but what I see is that all the different techniques are valid. It's like spinning a dial. You can set it here or here or here and get truth. So people can go to just about any type of practitioner and get something valuable if the practitioner is any good.
Yeah, I'm thinking again of the analogy of the elephant, and maybe even getting readings from different types of astrologers.
Yeah.
Helps you actually piece it together a little bit. What do we do when we discover that there is like a, I'm going to use the quantitative words, bad and good aspects, although,
Yeah, no, I know they're valid in a way. That's valid.
Yeah. What do we do when we discover there's like a bad aspect? Do we just stay in bed and with a blanket over our head?
It's tempting. It's tempting, but obviously it's a challenge. I mean, it's how Dane Rudyard was a very famous astrologer, and he wrote some extremely insightful books. And he said, it's not the event that happens to the person, it's the person who happens to the event. So it's all in terms of our ability to transmute the energy and deal with it in a constructive way, rather than being felled by it like a tree falling down in the forest. It's like, oh, I have a terrible Mars, which I did have, a terrible Mars aspect. Should I hide? And if you can take it on, you're going to learn to use that force in life more adeptly. If you hide from it, you'd just be, overcome by that energy.
Yeah. And I also think that it helps because sometimes people will say to me, Loretta, what is going on in the sky? I'm having a really hard time. And I'm like, I don't actually do personal charts. I'm a hobbyist over here, right? But, there's, these planets are doing this thing, right? And maybe that might help explain it. We're going to go ahead and take a station break. And I have a feeling like I can't believe we're at the bottom of the hour. That I feel like I've talked to you for 3 minutes. I'm talking to the amazing Katharine or Kate Merlin. I love your last name. It's
my real name. It's my birth name.
Yeah, well, you're definitely a wizard of the skies, honey. You're it. And her book, Astrology, the Magic Mirror. And don't go away, because when we come back, I'm going to ask her about the infamous Mercury retrograde and what retrogrades mean altogether. So we're going to take a little station break. This is Loretta Brown. We'll be right back.
Cool. All clear, ladies.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're still on YouTube. I have so many questions to ask you. And I got to thinking, I should have asked you if you'd even look at my chart, right? It's really great how to compare all that. Yeah. I want to ask you something though. I run across things like, and I'll probably bring this onto the air, but I'll introduce it into our space. I run across things like Pluto return and its effect upon the United States, right? Mm-hmm. Or these massive things. And I want to ask you a general question. When we see these big planets out there doing their thing, and I think the answer is obvious, but I'm going to ask it anyway. There are planets who affect us more globally or more collectively, or
those are called the higher planets.
Okay.
After Saturn, which apparently is it encloses us in the most immediate kinds of energies that we can deal with. Beyond that, there's interpersonal energies that are universal energies, starting with Neptune, which is a beautiful energy, but also very hard to handle, and Uranus, which is the individualizer, and then Pluto, which is the transformer, but it breaks things down and then they're reborn. But they're not personal energies. They're collective energies, essentially, I think.
So you have like a group of people, let's say, everybody born in 1978 or something will have a certain influence that all of them will deal with. Is that a way to say it?
That's probably true. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. Yeah, the collective realities.
Ready to come back in?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Here we go.
No problem. I love it. Welcome back to the original Loretta Brown Show with my guest, Katharine Merlin, or Kate Merlin, and her book, Astrology, The Magic Mirror. And you can find out more about me, Loretta Brown, at ReikiOasis.com or at the KKNW archive site. And by the way, these radio shows are recorded on all kinds of platforms. You can find it, listen to us on Podcast One, iTunes, Spotify. Somebody even said I'm on Audible. And the live YouTubes can be found on the KKNW site. Look for the Loretta Brown Show. And yeah, you can listen to them over and over again like my daughter does. When she wants to hear my voice.
That's sweet. That's very sweet.
I think it's funny. Like it. Yeah, I like it. So before the break, I said that when we got back, I was going to ask Kate about Mercury retrograde and retrogrades in general. Can you talk to us about that? Because everybody always goes, oh, it's Mercury retrograde. My hair's on fire. Right.
There are a lot of debates about, whether it's really worth looking at. I think it is. And in fact, what it is that happens is that particular planet that goes retrograde is moving more slowly in relationship to the Earth. And so it appears to be moving backwards. I mean, it's not really moving backwards. We know that the planets don't move backwards, but it appears that way. And I think the synchronistic effect is that, yes, I think things are with Mercury retrograde. I've seen this to some degree. I haven't tested it, and there are astrologers who claim that they have, and it's true and it's not. But you would imagine that reality of something moving more slowly, and so that the Earth appears to be outdistancing it, would have an effect. And Mercury retrograde is a time when things do get more skewed, because Mercury is the planet of details and thinking. I think people don't think as clearly, perhaps. And there's confusion in terms of cross signals and whatnot, details, things getting slowed down that have to do with Mercury issues like documents or details.
I also was asking during the break about planetary influences on the individual versus the collective. And I was just, while you were talking about Mercury retrograde, I was thinking, so if Mercury is retrograde, that affects the collective, but dependent upon your own chart, it might have a different effect upon you. Would that be correct?
Well, everybody's Mercury is placed in a sign and has certain aspects to it. So that kind of shows how their mind operates and how their communications work. And some are more adept with Mercury than others. And so, yes, I think there's a way in which it'll affect the Mercury retrograde.
Yeah, I love what you just said there. Yeah, some people are more adept with Mercury than others, which brings me to a question about all of the planets. Could you tell the listening audience basically what the planets represent? Because Mercury we think of as communication, right?
Yeah.
But could you talk about that and the influence of those planets upon us?
Yeah. Okay. Mercury is the functioning of the mind, just our regular minds, and it's a very profound planet because you can see so many things like the nervous system, the functioning of the nervous system. Someone who has, for instance, another planet on their Mercury, like Mars, is going to talk very fast and might have nervous system issues. Okay, that's Mercury. Then we have Venus, which has to do with what we pull towards us. It's our drawing female power, and it's love and romance and sensuality. Mars is a tough energy. It represents the male energy, but it's so aggressive. It's a survival instinct, And people who have very strong Marses are usually very successful, although they may be ruthless. And it rules inflammation, so you can see that from it. And then what do we have next? We have Mercury, Venus, Mars. We're going into Jupiter. Jupiter is more of a principle. It's a little more abstract than those planets I just described, and it's about expansion, the whole way in which things expand and grow. And it used to be Jupiter was a benefic god, and it has very positive attributes, but it can lead to self-indulgent because we're like, oh yes, like Mercury, Venus or Jupiter can be someone who eats too much.
Oh, yes.
They indulge in the pleasures of life.
Yeah.
And then Saturn is its opposite, and it's about contractive energy, like this, and it's a very stern energy. It rules the conscience, and it's Yahweh, the punitive god, and it is limitation and gravity. It brings us lessons to learn, and it's when you pass Saturn in terms of your evolution that you get into the higher energies, which are Neptune. Oh, Neptune is the principle of unity. It's like we're all one. It melts boundaries, and it's positive in some ways, but people who have afflictions to it are constantly trying to melt their boundaries, and they get into escapism a lot. But if it's well aspected, the person, now Joe Biden has a beautiful Neptune, by the way.
Mm.
He has something in his chart that my teacher used to say showed that the person was an initiate, which really surprised me. Saturn sextile Neptune, but it's the whole awareness of our unity, our absolute interconnectedness. And then Uranus is the rebel, the individualizer, the genius, the intuition, the thing that tells us to follow our true self. It's the true self. Then Pluto goes beyond everything. It breaks everything down and makes it be reborn. So it's regeneration. And it's a difficult energy, but it's extremely profound. The alchemists, I think, were tapping into what it was about, where they turned dross into gold.
Yes. Yeah.
That's very Plutonian, the whole idea of it.
Thank you. I love that. I wanted you to do that because I was thinking of a couple of things. Number one, the stories of the gods and goddesses, right? You know, when you read about them, and they all have personalities, and then
Yes.
you have these planets that are named after that, and there's this influence, you know, upon us. And I just want people to begin to look at that. Like for me, the planets are, they talk with each other, or they fight with each other, or
That's true.
or they get along, you know, and like all arms around each other, you know, and that I think is something to help invite people into more curiosity about astrology and actually having their charts done. I want to point out too, in your book, Astrology, the Magic Mirror, I love your book. You not only talk about astrology, but you give these real life stories of how it shows up in people's lives. And so it's a very readable book. I want people to understand that. You also have a whole chapter about love, and you have a whole chapter about sex. That'll probably make them buy it right there. Right? And these are, and you have very clear in the book, you talk about if your Venus is in, you know,
Which sign?
Yeah, which sign your Venus is in, how that will show up for you, and how it might help define you. So, and then I know I'm throwing a lot out there, but I just want to give people little tidbits, you know, of something that might appeal to them. You also talk a lot about life cycles, right? The great life cycles.
Yeah.
So in your own life, because you do share this in the book, what are some things that have happened that aligned with your chart that helped make sense of that?
With the cycles?
The cycles or the placement of planets, right?
So many things. I don't know where to start with that.
Just maybe
So-
one that pops out. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, the cycles. Jupiter makes 12-year cycles. It comes back to the place. A cycle is when a planet comes back to the place it was when you were born. So it just starts you on a new journey. And I had, discovered in my own life that very profound things happened at my first Jupiter cycle. The next one, I stepped into a new reality. And, I went from where I had been into becoming a traveler of the world. Each 12-year cycle seemed to launch me to some degree. It's not always so clear cut as that, but to some degree on a new learning, a growth period. So that's Jupiter, for instance.
I love that because, a lot of people also talk about their Saturn return.
Those are so profound. Oh,
can you talk about that for a moment?
Sure. It's every 29.7 years that the planet Saturn, which is the conscience and the structurer and, this very, very significant force of human energy or psychic energy, returns to where it was when you were born. And that time around between about 28 and late 27, 28, 29, people's lives often change profoundly because they start to see that they're creating patterns, that they're of a certain type, and either they just don't get it and don't try, or they say, oh, well, I could do something with this. And for me, it felt like when I reached that point in my life that I saw some of my patterns. And, when you're younger, things just happen to you. But then you reach a point, it's like the wheel of fate seems to move towards you because it's who you were. Then you start seeing who you were, and you have the opportunity to put your hand out and stop that wheel and turn it out. So you can start creating another reality. And then when you reach your next one, which is, in your late 50s, towards 58, 59, all that period, some people choose to leave the planet at that time. I've seen that happen.
Wow.
They're like, this is not working. Deep down, they're so dissatisfied. Each 27 at 29.7 years brings us to a point of reckoning, of coming to terms with what we have been, what we want to be, whether we're going to take responsibility or just crumble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also hearing you very clearly, and we've alluded to this a couple of times, but this is really about your story and what are you going to do with it?
Exactly. It's not about your being this kind of passive recipient of things that happen to you. It's about who you are, what you're doing here, what are you carrying, what are you creating. And if you approach life like that, you can really grow and open up and become much more fulfilled, I think is the way to look at it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I also, because I'm such a proponent of people, falling in love with their own self, going, well, this is who I am, rather than, gee, I wish I could be that over there. And embracing that in some fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that's a very positive way to look at it. And if we can accept that we have some constant purpose in being who we are and using our energy, that makes us evolve. It's a wonderful challenge. It's a wonderful way to live life.
Yeah, I love what you said about energy, because like I said, I do think of the planets as people, fighting and talking and whatnot, but they affect us, with that astrological forecast, the weather forecast, which also makes me think about people in the same way, because it's the way my brain works. Like, you're Kate and I'm Loretta, and we're planets, we're stars of our own forests, right?
That's true. That's a very good attitude. And in Vedic astrology, when they interpret some of the positions of the planets, they say, oh, these planets are friends. They'll actually say that they're friends in your chart.
So you also talk in your book about the importance of knowing the ascendant. What is the ascendant, and why?
Ascendant is what is on the horizon at the minute you were born, according to the exact spot you were in at that time, and it defines the whole setup of your pattern. So if you don't have your time, you can't really have a chart. It won't work, because it's all about us living in this plane of time, this dimension, this reality of time. And that's what the ascendant is based on, that exact minute of birth.
So is that also what people say when, so-and-so is rising?
Yeah, it's the rising sign. It's what's on the horizon,
right,
when you're born.
So my chart, just three things: moon, sun, and ascendant.
I'm curious about them. What are they?
So I'm a Aries sun,
Oh,
Capricorn moon,
oh,
Sagittarius rising.
aha.
That makes sense. Right?
Sagittarius, yes.
I love how you lit up. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Well, I knew there had to be something very cosmic going on. Sagittarius is this. It rules the ninth house of the the chart, the basic charts, the whole way the setup goes, and it's the house of visions, beliefs, spirituality. So Sagittarians, I have a Sagittarius moon. We're attracted to all of that conceptual and kind of visionary, kind of level.
Yeah, very visionary. Yeah, that's fun. Thank you. And I wanted to pull this out too, because you mentioned Biden and he had this energy of the initiate. You also point out in your book some things about Trump's chart. Do you want to share just a couple of things? You have to go deep into that. Right?
Not too much, but I'll just say.
Yeah, because I don't want to turn it that way.
Yeah, no, I know. But he does have Regulus rising, which is a fixed star that's on his ascendant. You probably heard this, which is considered extremely lucky, like the luckiest royal star. But it does have a dark side to it, where it can bring destruction on itself. But his pattern shows Neptune afflictions, for one thing, which means that he's out of sync with the principle of unity, very much so. And he doesn't think clearly. And, he's also very hurt, which, doesn't bring up my sympathies in terms of him. But he has an affliction to the planet of love, to Venus, that shows that he wasn't nurtured, that there wasn't love around him. So he doesn't have a very prepossessing chart, but he has an extremely strong will. And Mars, the planet of aggression, dominates his pattern. It's rising.
Yeah. I thank you for sharing that. And like I said, I don't want to go too far into politics, but I think it's a good illustrative example of how the chart can help define or clarify around someone, right?
Yeah, it can.
Yeah. And also because I always believe people are who they are because they're doing what they came to do, which is a big question. That could be a big conversation. Like, why did that, right? Which might tie into past lives and collective and all kinds of things. I want to talk, and I'm jumping from question to question because I have so many questions. Can you talk briefly about astrocartography? I have a lot of clients who are what I call migrating, and people are being pulled, and several people are like, I feel like I need to move, but I don't know where to go. What are the benefits of astrocartography?
I think it's very useful. What it does is it sets your chart up in another location and shows how it works there. And it can be quite accurate and defining. Someone could have a really beautiful Venus on the angle. That's how they define it in a astrocartography chart, and find that they're in a very loving environment. They're very popular. Whereas if Saturn came up, where they set the chart up in this other location on an angle, they would feel they have a lot of responsibilities, or they would feel somewhat obscured. I think it functions. I think I did it for myself. I can see it. It's not overwhelming. I mean, you're still you. You can still manifest your energy and grow and do something really positive. It's just that it's another factor. It's something else to factor in.
Yeah, I love what you said, because it's my understanding that, like, so if you were going to say I needed to, grow my business, or I want to find love, you might use astrocartography to help you figure out where to be on the planet, or where it might be more.
I think it would help. I mean, you're still going to bring to it your own issues, whatever they may be.
Right. Yeah, whatever they may be. So can you predict death in a chart?
I have a whole chapter on that. And no, because death isn't what we think it is. It really is not. That I've discovered that from setting up charts. In some charts, death looks like heaven.
Well,
I mean, it's weird. I mean, it's not what you'd expect.
Well, yeah, there could be that.
For some people, you see, oh wow, look at that. Ooh, they're going to be fine, and they are fine, but they're not here. But also, sometimes it depends. Like a horrible assassination or something doesn't look nice. It doesn't look like a beautiful energy pattern. You can see the danger of it. You can see the possibility of it when you set up a chart like that.
Mention that.
I do. I go into that, and some people who die sadly and cruelly, it shows.
Yeah. That's great. So why did you write this book? What do you hope people really get from it, Kate?
It's my true book that I wrote, because there's so many misconceptions about astrology. And, I wrote 2 other books. The first one was really pretty direct, but it wasn't like this one. I just wanted to say what I had experienced and discovered from astrology and share it, instead of having people want to say, oh, where's my Venus and my Mars, and what am I like, and what's going to happen to me? I wanted them to think, what is it about? How can I learn? What is my purpose? I wanted to bring another kind of perspective to astrology. And it's very esoteric, and it's not for everybody, but those who really want to understand and grow, maybe it'll shed some light.
Yeah, I just want everyone to know, of course, I read it from front to back and loved it. It's an easy read, and I think it really fulfills a need in the market out there, and maybe in our consciousness, where it's a really good introduction, but you also give a lot of really great details. And if people want to take the time to get their chart done, like you can even get a free chart done online, just the chart. I do recommend. Yeah, but you could do that to find out, okay, where's my Venus, and take a look at
absolutely
what you've got in here, and things like that. But so it's a good read. I just recommend it to everybody. I'm like, yeah, I should just go ahead and get it. Astrology, the Magic Mirror. So where can people find you?
Well, I have a website, and you have to spell my name right. I heard apparently if you don't, it's a disaster. If you don't spell it with 2 A's.
Imposter Katharine Merlin's out there.
There's some other Katharine Merlin.
There are other Loretta Browns. This, don't get confused, right?
Yeah, it has to be spelled with 2 A's like my mother spelled it. KatharineMerlin.com is my website. But also the book is on Amazon and is available. And I write the column for Town and Country magazine.
Awesome. That's great. All righty. Any last words? We're down to just the last little bit. Mhm.
I think the last words are, don't see yourself as a victim of fate. See yourself as an author of your own story.
Oh, I love that so much. I think that's your $1 million t-shirt. Katharine Merlin with 2 A's. Is really, really wonderful to have you on my show. Thank